Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, you can send questions and comments to the Facebook event page for episode 249, Precipitous Decline, or primarily everyone's been hopping over to the YouTube chat, which has been awesome. So if you're watching us live, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, depending on where you are. And hop on over to the YouTube chat and you can interact with us live. So that's cool. Welcome. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, we have Robert Johnson. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing well, John. Good to hear you and good to see you. Robert Johnson from past Master Waukegan 78 and current sitting secretary at Space Novum Lodge under dispensation. Host of Whence Came You Masonic podcast. Thanks.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, me neither.
Very good. Thank you. It's always great to have you. Mike, the intern, how are you tonight?
Good. Hey, Mike Hambrecht here from Triandria Lodge, number 780 in Rock Creek, Ohio, where I am the junior deacon and lodge education officer. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. And Mr. Handsome over there taking selfies, or what are you doing with your phone over there, Juan?
I'm showing a nice behind the scenes to our Knights and Squires in our private group. We have Brother Jim Kaufman here saying hello, and Joe Martinez as usual. And this is Juan Sepulveda from sunny Kissimmee, Florida, a lodge officer of Orange Blossom Lodge number 80. And the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast. Check this out. New episode tomorrow afternoon.
What?
I'd say morning, but tomorrow afternoon.
Look at that. Very excited to hear that. And in the green room, Juan has built up a lot of anticipation. So there's no doubt that the quality is going to be fantastic.
Thank you, brother.
All right. And for our special guest tonight, for the topic du jour, wanted to introduce Brother Lance Kennedy. Lance, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Absolutely. I'm Lance Kennedy, and I'm currently on the side of the freeway, somewhere between Dallas and Austin. That's why I'm not coming in on video feed. So I got caught up in some traffic traveling, but this podcast, this interview is so important that I decided to try my hand at hooking up my Wi-Fi. And so I hope you all can hear me fine. But I'm a Master Mason, member of Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge in Dallas, Texas, the Harvard Lodge in Boston, Massachusetts, a full member of the Texas Lodge of Research, as well as a full member of several other lodges, Scottish Rite Mason, York Rite Mason, and all-around lover of the craft. So thanks for having me on.
Excellent, excellent. And as Juan mentioned earlier, we wanted to thank our patrons in advance for helping to support the show. Juan's even doing some live behind the scenes right now, which is a lot of fun to kind of show a peek behind the curtain of what we do every week, and a couple other little tips and tricks and little things that we put in advance. Some conversations have occurred in this private Facebook group. So if you want to join that conversation, hop on over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable and chip in a few bucks to help us support the show, keep our hosting costs down, buy some new equipment, and maybe tip us a beer or something. I don't know. We'll see what, but most of it goes to the show, I promise. So again, tonight we're going to talk about the precipitous decline, specifically of craft Freemasonry, right? What our membership numbers are doing now. We kind of bring this up about once a year or so, just to kind of keep our finger on the pulse. Me being the data guy, the numbers guy, I wanted to kind of revisit that and kind of look at where we are again. And it was recommended to have Brother Lance Kennedy on due to some of the pot stirring that he did back in November, December of 2018 with a couple articles and rebuttals that he wrote. And so, Lance, I'm going to open the floor up to you first to kind of talk about what your thoughts were. Have they changed? Have they been influenced? And anything else you want to add about where you see the state of the craft with regards to membership numbers?
Well, I mean, it's been a fun ride. I've written several, Masonic related articles, 3 of which have gone viral. And the last couple that I've written, particularly my article on Masonic decline, really, I believe, started a broader conversation. We've had gentlemen such as yourself and brothers such as yourselves have been discussing this issue because it's so important to the health and future of our craft. But I did feel that, generally speaking, most Masons avoid this topic of whether or not we are a healthy organization, what may cause a perceived decline if there is one. And so I wrote an article, as we've mentioned, detailing this perceived decline and backing it up with some data that, when I say that Freemasonry is dying, and I pointed this out to RJ both on his show and as well as in private conversation, it doesn't mean we're dead, and it doesn't mean we're destined to die, but it does mean we're in an extremely unhealthy state that, if left unabated, will result in death, virtual death. There will always be, I believe, at some point, in our near future, a handful of Masons, right? I mean, there could be 10 Masons, and we could be theoretically alive in that sense. Someone's preserving it. But, going from our current numbers, a little shy of 1 million on the books, to, let's say, a couple 100,000 and so forth, really is not a good sign and not a good trajectory. So I wanted to address first and foremost that issue, and then I had a second follow-up article which dealt with 2 possible trajectories, one of which is the one I just highlighted, where we end up becoming an irrelevant vestige of the past, or we could, really solidify our base, solidify kind of, the organizational infrastructure and so forth, and thereby preserving not only our current numbers, but also helping really, I think, produce a much healthier organization into the future.
So before you dive into some of that analysis, there was one
Sure.
thing that I wanted to kind of highlight, that I was going back and looking at the Masonic Services Association of North America and the numbers that they put out. And the most recent numbers that they've published are about, well, at this point, 2 years out of date. So they have 2017's numbers, but don't have 2018's yet. Hopefully that should be updated soon, because just a couple weeks ago, they had the Conference of Grandmasters of North America, where they usually have the Grand Secretaries there and gather that information, whether it's there or at the Conference of Grand Secretaries. So regardless, either way, we should be seeing 2018's numbers being updated. Well, when I looked at some of my other data and forecasting, I had my spreadsheet up, and I was trying to forecast out, given the slope of the downward trend. And if we get 2018's numbers and they're close to what I think they'll be, the forecast for 2018's numbers will be around 1,035,000 mainstream Master Masons on the books. However, then the interesting data point is, here we are now in 2019. Given the same rate of decline, 2019, and if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen this year, will be the year that we officially go under 1 million members in the United States. So that's really kind of shocking when you think about it. I mean, that here we are in our lifetime, not in our lifetime, this year, because unless something changes, which there really hasn't been any hard drive to turn that number around, right? With a solid plan, with results, right? Result-driven actions. So given that, we are probably right now at that turning point that's tipping us over, or sorry, technically under the 1 million man mark. What do you have to say about that?
Hey, real quick, let me just say this, Lance. I'm going to let you answer, and while you're answering, I'm looking up these couple papers that were published in the Illinois Lodge of Research that actually had projections that were done in like 1998. So go ahead and answer, and I'm going to look these up because I think they're hilarious.
Well, I can't wait to see your findings. Brother Johnson always surprises me with some great stuff. But yeah, I think we're what my article showed and what the data showed was, and what was concerning was that, you know, we expected to see a decrease in membership. It followed an S curve. But what happened over the last couple years is that the percentage of loss, the attrition rate sped up. And that rate of increase is what is most problematic. It should have leveled off following a true S curve. And as you mentioned, we're going to be less than 1 million. I'm not as concerned per se about numbers. I kind of highlight this point. You know, if we were 500,000 Masons, but we were an extremely healthy organization with most lodges having to fight off applicants, you know, it wouldn't be the same conversation we're having now. The problem is we have a massive infrastructure built for millions of Masons, right? There's a vestige of the 1950s and 60s and so forth that we're trying to prop up through, you know, really poor decision making. There are certain Grand Lodges, I'm not going to name a name because I'm a member of this Grand Lodge, but they're doing things like one-day festivals where they initiate men all 3 degrees in one day, or referral programs that if you initiate or you sign the petitions on X number of brothers and they stay in the fraternity X amount of years, you'll get, you know, dues reductions and so forth. We're doing all these kind of gimmicky short-term fixes to make a mass amount of Masons to prop up the numbers. But, you know, to be frank, you know, these are not long-term fixes. And this is why in my second article where I talk about 2 trajectories, and I give the example of 2 different cities, Pittsburgh and Detroit, we have to really make some very tough decisions now when we have, you know, the ability to do so, or it's difficult, or we can be forced to make difficult decisions in the next 2 or 3 decades. And my fear, and I believe it's well-founded, is that the emergency scenario is probably the more likely of the 2. Because, you know, we have a system in most states where grandmasters come in for 1 year at a time. That year is a year for them to be a celebrity for a year. And they really don't have any type of institutional authority to make these types of decisions, which frankly would be highly unpopular to the rank and file membership, who I don't think really are willing. I don't know if I should say able, but willing to grasp the severity of the situation that's facing us. You know, we have hundreds of lodges in Texas. You know, about 800 plus lodges. When we have the Masons for about 400 or fewer lodges. And I think that the same can be said for most jurisdictions. We are simply trying to spread ourselves too thin to appease some type of ego that, you know, that Freemasonry didn't collapse on our watch. But, you know, as you said, the new numbers are going to come in. Maybe I'm going to be proved wrong, and I hope I am. I'll say that on the record. I hope I'm proved wrong. I hope that fraternity, yeah. Okay, I mean, but I think we're going to see the opposite. I think it's going to still show the same trend, and, you know, I don't know if anyone's going to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, we in Virginia, we have, you know, a committee on strategic planning, and we also have a committee on membership, of which I'm recently a member, and I've been trying to express this concern for the long-term plan, right? That if we're not turning this around, then we're failing as a committee. And I don't know if it's like systemic in the way that some of these maybe not the committees per se, but definitely the leadership here in Virginia, they serve 1-year terms as Grand Master, and everything just kind of moves up. And so you want your year as Grand Master to be, you know, very positive. Hey, look at all the great stuff I did. And then you're out of that seat, and just like, you know, any of us who've served as worshipful master, you're kind of glad to be done with it. You're proud that you served, but you're ready to hand it off. And some of the problems that you didn't get to are now the next guy's problems. And so you do that a couple decades at a time, and you really haven't fixed some of the root cause as well. Robert, did you find anything yet? Are you still looking?
So I was still looking, and it looks like it was a video clip that I took of the book as I was flipping through the pages, and it looked like they actually predicted a continued decline from 2.4 million in 1991 to Masons in 2010. They said that we'd only have 700,000 members. So we're doing better.
True.
But then they also put in the declination compounded with life expectancy and actuary on that, which brought their estimate even lower. So they felt that in 1991 they were going to be at 2.4 million, which is where they were when they did this particular piece, and then in 2010 they projected that we'd only have 600,000 in the United States.
Okay.
I just think it's interesting that somebody said we were going to be way worse than we are, and I think it's kind of interesting that we're right around 1 million.
I mean, we're not too far off that mark, though, right? I mean, they I guess 300,000 is a good number, but my point is they did at least predict some type of substantial decline, right? I mean, it's hard to predict with certainty over 20 years.
Yeah. Also, this is for the Illinois Lodge of Research, and let's just be honest. Nobody on any Grand Lodge level reads anything that's published in the Illinois Lodge of Research, or any Lodge of Research for that matter, because if you're not a Grand, you don't want to hear it most of the time. So,
yeah, and remember, all those figures were all pre one-day classes, so the one-day classes probably kicked that all into
Well, and here's the other thing too. So when I was doing my research on my first article, I actually spoke with the brother over at the Masonic Service Association in North America and so forth, and he told me that, and I'm not going to go into detail because I think some of it was private, conversation, but the numbers that go into the actual numbers of Masons per state vary by state. So there are, I think, 3 major jurisdictions that include entered apprentices in the numbers. There are some states that include individuals who haven't paid dues in their numbers to inflate the numbers. So there's a lot of fuzzy math going on.
To that also, like Illinois, I know for a fact Illinois reports all memberships, not members. So if you're a plural and you're paying per capita 2 times or 3 times, you're counted 3 times.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I'm getting at. So our numbers right now, we show, let's say we're about to hit 1 million, some number around 1 million. We know for a fact that number is below 1 million based on exactly your statement. And then, of course, the attrition rate amongst entered apprentices is fairly high. So, I believe probably right now, if we just talk about Masons on the books, we're talking about 1 million less, 900,000, 800,000 Masons. And then we talk about active attending, Lodge Masons, I'd say it's 50% or less. Maybe, 400,000 Masons that are actually active in the craft.
So, Juan or Mike, what is your assessment of the state of the craft?
Yeah, I know I've expressed this before. Of course, we hear these very catchy descriptions of what's happening with the craft, like the craft is dying, or no, the craft is not dying, the craft is refining. And I posit that yes, there is a significant decline that has an effect on the craft, but like Lance was saying earlier, is when we say it's dying, perhaps is not that it's gonna go down to 0 anytime soon, because when we look at the numbers, we're looking also at averages. We're not looking at when you narrow down and you look at one lodge, there are some lodges that are never going to go under. There are some lodges that maybe these other lodges are going to continue to dwindle, but these others are very strong and are growing and are very energetic. And with the whole refinement, the refining argument, I've said that when I hear the word refining, I'm thinking like with spirits. When you refine spirits, you're separating what you want from what you don't want, and you're discarding the excess water, perhaps the excess sugars, or transforming those sugars into alcohol. And that's not what's happening. The decline is indiscriminate. It's happening across the board. We're losing good members, talented members, people that have a lot to offer. and we're losing them, at a pretty similar rate than we're losing others. So I see our numbers are dwindling, but we're not getting better, in my opinion.
Right, because that's the thing, is we haven't seen some results. RJ will be quick to correct me and say that there are certainly pockets, and and to your point, Juan, if you normalize across the entire state or normalize across the entire country, the numbers are going to look bad because you're not going to see the little positive blips buried therein. So right, I mean, the first thing that a person with some common sense would do is say, let's find where it is working. Let's go focus on those positive blips, those positive lodges that will never go under because they're crushing it with, financial stability. They're crushing it with active membership. They're crushing it with total number of members. If it's working, keep doing it. Right? If it's not working, stop doing it. Pretty simple. I know this is like advanced.
Can I reply? Yeah, can I reply to that real quick though? I think both of y'all are correct. There are clearly bright lights in our Masonic world, and my lodge in Dallas, my lodge in Boston, great examples of lodges that are filled with guys, 40 and younger, very dedicated to an esoteric experience, high quality, ritual and so forth. So there clearly are examples. But from my experience, particularly in Texas, the lodges that are doing extremely well, and there's a handful of them, ones that are doing what we would consider, in this group, doing it right, quote unquote, right? They're constantly under scrutiny for the smallest details, because it's almost as if it's almost as if they're being suspected of doing some type of voodoo, right? Like, how are they getting all these guys in? Why are they attracting all these young men? This is the exact thing we all want. Brings suspicion upon them. And instead of going and saying, hey, you have a lodge in Dallas that has 50 some odd guys under 40, all wearing suits, all doing great ritual, esotericists, doing like tonight there was building the temple and so forth, one of our esoteric discussions. Instead of replicating that, we're constantly having to fight off suspicion that we're doing things outside of the law and the parameters of Grand Lodge when it isn't really the case. So I think there are bright lights, but we're fighting against some type of institutional inertia where any type of innovation, or rather returning to a traditional form of Masonry, is suspect, and it's sad.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And I've had numerous conversations with brothers who, when we start talking about how things were done at one point or how things are done in a different jurisdiction, and you see the excitement in their eyes thinking, man, but why aren't we doing that? Like, that would be awesome. And the lodges that actually take the initiative and start doing things, like you said, going back to the roots or going back to some of these elements that a lot of people might look as innovations, but they're just a rekindling of an old tradition. These people that start this see a positive result, but they become the scapegoat of the leadership, instantly snuffed out. How many times we've heard of a chamber of reflection being the source of strife within a jurisdiction, the inspiration for a grand edict or something of the kind, when chambers of reflections are a part of Masonry and have been forever. And all right, let me calm down.
You know what's interesting about the whole chamber of reflection thing, just as an aside here, is when we first started talking about this idea, like out in the open, it was almost like, maybe I want to talk about it, maybe I don't. I don't know who watches this show. Am I going to get in trouble if I admit that I support it? And over time, we're all kind of like, yeah, I like the chamber and skulls and everything. We like the philosophy behind it, right? And as this starts progressing, we have these conversations in the Winding Stairs group or on a Grand Lodge page, and I can honestly say, in I don't know, whatever it is, the 6 years or whatever, since I've been, 10 years since I've been a Mason, and on being a Mason on Facebook and seeing the discussions about it, it's really interesting to see now that not everybody, like, immediately it used to be, that's not Masonic, that's,
Out of here, right? Mhm.
it's it's anti-Christian, it's anti whatever, and now guys are like, oh yeah, we do that too. Shh.
Yeah.
So
Well,
would it be?
and RJ, so an interesting kind of point that you're saying. There was this is an anecdotal or story that was relayed to me by a brother in one of my lodges. There was a Scottish Rite flyer, or I think it was some type of fundraiser. It had tickets, but it had a skull and crossbones on it. Which, if you're a Scottish Rite Mason, the Scottish Rite degrees are replete with skulls and crossbones and so forth. A past Grand Master of Texas forced this gentleman, this brother, to recall and stop selling the tickets because, quote, he didn't want us to be associated with biker gangs and the skull and crossbones from Yale, right? There's this kind of like duplicitous attitude of like, well, we don't want anything scary, but then in secret we're going to go and wear skulls and crossbones and participate in our ritual. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, and this I think is a silver lining when we're talking about, and this is something that's come to my mind recently about this kind of decline of our numerical decline, at least, is that our numbers are declining, but the percentage of brothers that are thinking like us, that are pro traditional observance, is increasing in terms of a total percentage of the whole. So, let's say 15, 20 years ago, we would say, 5% or less of brothers were aware of chambers of reflection. I think that number is going up to 10, 15%, 20%. And as the number decreases below 1 million and goes to 700,000, I think that number is going to go up to 50%, 60%. And there might be a point when we max out, but I do think that's the silver lining. As the numbers decrease, our percentage will increase. And I think that's when we're going to see the change. So it may take 20 years, but I think things like chambers of reflection will happen.
That's a wonderful point too to make, is that a lot of people aren't thinking about how the ratio changes over time when variables are removed. So our sample size actually decreases and the active participation side increases. So not only are we going to see people who are more informed with Masonry, but we're also going to see the active, we say 10%, it's not 10%, right? Well, I don't know. It's under that, but we'll see that increase too. Like maybe we'll see an increase of active membership also, with that same kind of ratio increase, maybe go up to 15 or 16 active percent. That was a great point, Lance. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Two quick things. Granted, there are things that the brothers are becoming more aware of, and it's important that happens. That doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be something that is public. For example, there are aspects of our fraternity that might not be secret, although discretion is warranted for the impact that they might have in the life of a brother when experiencing it, and in a sense also to avoid perhaps creating some ignorant stigma on the outside world. The second point I wanted to mention is the fact that optimistic view that there's a percentage increase in the brothers that are becoming aware of what chamber of reflection and other practices are. I'm very optimistic about it, mainly because although the fraternity as an organization is not advancing at the pace of society, the membership is. For example, you have technological outlets like the Masonic Roundtable, Whence Came You, and you have blogs like Millennium Freemason and Between the Pillars, all kinds of different resources that help brothers become aware of the traditions of Masonry. Civil is another example. Thank you, Mike. So as these brothers are becoming more aware and more educated, they might be lacking education in their lodges, but they're coming to the internet and to the respective meetings that come out of these interactions, and they're learning what Masonry is, was, and could be. And these are the same people that remain active in the organization and will take leadership positions. So my hope is pinned on that these brothers that are listening to us or reading our communications, they don't just become excited about it now, but that they put it in their hearts and minds that when they are in a position to go and vote, or for a amendment or something, when there is a chance for them to be in a position of leadership that can allow Masonry to be true to its form, then that they remember this and they act accordingly.
It brings up another good point, because hopefully, most of us will live past 2040, which is kind of where the line does go to zero if we do nothing else. And so I plan on living a little bit longer than that, and but that doesn't mean I'll be a member. So the advice is, if you're of like mind, if you're listening to the show, if you're going out and looking for Masonic education, even if you do nothing else, hang on, right? Because as Lance said, the percentage is going to go up if we can just kind of outlast it. So we're not saying tolerate mediocrity, right? We're not saying just stay
Tolerate mediocrity for now.
for a little while. Just for a little while.
Yeah.
Still shop around, find another lodge that better suits your needs, right? That fits better. But at the same time, understand that we're playing a long game, right? This is a long game, and there are strength in numbers, and so that is kind of one direction I hadn't thought of before, of whether it's complete revolution, whether it's complete death, and then maybe there's a path down the middle that's holding on for the long game, so that when, as you said, when we're kind of more into the that like mind is in leadership positions, now you have a chance to make some strong choices that haven't been made for decades.
Yeah, John, and look at our affinity for habits and how they're formed. And if you look at an abrupt increase in novel activities in your life, you're going to drop those within a short period of time. But when your improvement is incremental and it's controlled and it's methodical, you're able to sustain it and build upon it and eventually get to where you want to get. Weight loss is the perfect example for that. Yeah, I can lose 4 pounds per week. I can, yeah. And I'm going to gain it right back in a month.
Exactly.
But when you modulate that down to 1.5 pounds, a pound, and you start building the habits that are going to foment that weight loss, and you have better quality of food and more activity, then it sticks with you. It's a part of you. Now, what we can't allow to seep in is complacency. For us to be complacent on how Masonry is, yes, hold on, but don't be complacent. It's like, if you can make a little adjustment or say one word of encouragement to that brother and get him a little excited to actually go to the meeting, and to actually stand up and, read the paper he wrote, those little things, when you add them together, they add up to something wonderful.
I guess what you're saying, Juan, there is we should chip away at this rather than try and sledgehammer it, huh?
That's right. That is right.
Are we showing some working tools that can help with that?
Yeah.
All right. So Lance, what do you think is kind of the best case scenario? Let's be glass half full for a little bit. Given what you're seeing, given some of the movements that you're aware of, and kind of what the numbers may show, where do you see the best case, the optimistic results of the next 2 decades?
Well, I mean, I think the best case scenario is one day the whole Grand Lodge line of every state wakes up and says, "Hey, there's a problem. We got to make some big adjustments," and they do it. And that in fact staves off the emergency of what I'm talking about, state of emergency that will occur at some point. As I've mentioned previous in this interview, I don't think that that's going to happen. So the actual realistic best case scenario is one where brothers such as you and us and those listening, and I know there are hundreds and thousands of us across the country and the world that think, the same way. We love this fraternity, but we don't like what we're seeing overall. They continue to stay active in the craft. They continue to participate in whatever way they can, particularly in the craft and Blue Lodge level, okay? And they affect their local lodge. They either found lodges or they join lodges and are able to rehabilitate them and create real bastions in different regions of traditional masonry, of high quality masonry. And I think, if we can really see that play out over the next 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to have real strong centers of masonry throughout the country. And at that point, I think, we'll be able to turn things around and go the opposite direction, where we won't have necessarily a decline, but we'll be able to create momentum, really rebrand ourselves, and think about exactly what it means to be a Mason and sell that to others. So, it's kind of, as you mentioned, it's that modulation, that balancing act where we're not complacent, where we're constantly moving forward, but we're not overly optimistic. And we also keep in mind that this is a long game. So, we're not just screaming at the wind. We're not King Lear, just yelling at the wind, calling out and hurricanes and whatnot. But we are, in effect, talking to each other, networking, building this mass movement of high quality masonry that's focused on transformation and the initiatic experience. And in 20 years, we can see down the road, like, hey, there is this golden era that's going to come. And that's what I truly believe. I think that the best time to be a Mason amongst our age group is going to be in 20 years. I think in 20 years, we'll be able to say this is the best time to be a Mason. And unfortunately, some brothers won't be able to see that. But the truth is they at least can know that by helping, podcasts such as this, podcasts such as Whence Came You, donating, contributing, supporting these podcasts and these efforts, having speakers come into their lodges, that they're going to be able to build this better and brighter future for all of us. So best case scenario is we keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to actually see the results in 10, 15, 20 years.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I don't want to be too long-winded. There are 5 of us, so but I do really think that. I think I'm positive, and I just think we can either conserve our resources or expend them, and that's kind of my concern, is that we're going to be burning through reserves and burning through time and energy and so forth, trying to prop up this aging infrastructure of retirement centers and whatever charities we have, the myriad charities in different jurisdictions, and all these associated organizations that don't make Masons, and are some of which are kind of houses of ill repute, and I won't name names, but y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, at this point, if it was up to me, we'd cut them all loose, cut the dead weight, and consolidate.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a question for Mike. What do you think about the number of appendant bodies? Right, there's some people that believe that appendant bodies are one of the many causes for the decline in membership. Right, either because they're being distracted, or if you take the Andrew Hammer approach, that they are a distraction to Masonry. But do you think that there's still a place once Masonry refines into a smaller number? Is there still a place for all of these appendant bodies or over time, or will they continue to be a distraction?
I do think that there's a place for some of them. I mean, I will say that there are some out there that are truly distractions. But honestly, that's kind of what their design was too. I mean, they were, without getting into specific ones, they were for fun. I will say that most of them wear special hats. That's not to say. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just playing off what you said too, continue with what you're saying, because I want to hear it. But most of these appendant bodies, now when we talk about appendant bodies, we were talking about, I think we should also include the associated organizations like BMLA and Rainbow Girls and all these other groups as well, that aren't Masonic per se. Most of them came about in the post-World War I era. So we have to contextualize why they were created, in addition to the fact that they exist, right? So go ahead. I just want to talk. It's for an earlier time in Masonry.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's when they, that's when all of the, that stuff really took off, was the post-World Wars. But you got the shrine became the party group, the grotto that became the poor man's shrine, and you have the tall cedars of Lebanon, which is really fun. I mean, you have the what is it? High 12, the lunch club, but then, I mean, and those again are just distraction groups. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have their place and they have some importance. I mean, if I'm not careful, there'll be plenty of guys saying, the shrine, what they do well. And it's true. What they do well is a good thing. I mean, the hospitals are a great thing, but I mean, and I'm not saying that they don't have a place and don't belong, but in some ways they are a distraction from, Blue Lodge Masonry. I mean, and, one of the things that, if you ask the York Rite and even the Scottish Rite bodies, at least in Ohio for sure, what hurt them the most. And that was when the shrine said, you no longer have to either be a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason or a Knights Templar. I mean, I'm not saying that was a good, reason to go all the way through all those bodies, but the reality was a lot of guys went through all those bodies just to become either a Knight Templar or.
Well, and what's happened in Texas is, and I know this, maybe it's not official, but Blue Lodges have become Shriner breeding grounds.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the Shriner bodies have basically taken over certain Blue Lodges just so guys can go through the degrees quickly and then join the shrine. And so, it's kind of an unfortunate, I don't mean to impugn the shrine because I know there's some good guys in it and so forth. But it's a prime example. See, personally, and I kind of put this in my second article as a litmus test for organizations that I think should go, really under scrutiny, whether or not we should be associated and expending resources. I think, first of all, do they further the initiatic experience? Do they reinforce the Blue Lodge degrees? And if they don't, then why are we even associated with them? I mean, honestly, there are plenty of great organizations out there that do a lot of great, good charity work, but they're not associated with Masonry. And, in this critical junction, when we have fewer and fewer guys, fewer and fewer, dues because we've refused to raise them for the last, 50 years, why are we promoting and propping up groups that don't make Masons and don't further that initiatic experience? So the shrine isn't the number one, I think, threat, in my opinion. But perhaps it is one of them. I don't know. I'll go out on a limb and say, I'm not totally convinced that, besides the good publicity through their hospitals, that they're really worth keeping the association with us.
I think what's interesting about what you just said is this idea that we're propping up organizations that don't have anything to do with Freemasonry. A wonderful example of that is we had an episode of the Masonic Roundtable that had something to do with an organization that's not even Masonic that happens at Masonic Week. It's this idea, the what is it, the Muscovites or something?
Yep, the Order of the Muscovites.
And so that's at Masonic Week. I don't care, but like, why is that even there? Or my wife posted an image today that was like my face, your wife's face when she learns you joined another Masonic group. And I used to be that guy. I would join all the different things, join all the clubs, right? Because you don't know what's going on until after a while. You're just like, oh man, it's just another group that needs money to fund their existence and doesn't do anything for me personally. It had zero relevant content.
I got thinking about that today too. Sorry to cut you off, RJ, but
yeah,
this is an interesting point because it would be nice if there was like a directory. Like, okay, I don't want all the secrets, but just tell me like what's the gist of what I'm going to get out of this, so I know, because it's super secret. You got to be invited, and then you get invited, and you're like, well, that's it.
That's it. Thanks for the dinner. Thanks for reading a ritual book in front of me for my initiation.
There are some other groups that are like mind-blowing rituals.
Yeah.
And you're like, I had no idea this was over here. And so the only way, it's like Pokemon, right? The only way to really find out what the good characters are is if you collect them all.
Right. Well, it's, in the real world for the profane out there, it's the same argument as people who try to play the lottery. Well, you don't win if you don't play. But in Masonry, when you play, you're going out and you're getting all these degrees, and there is no winning. maybe you get this prestigious thing where you are at the top of an organization. That was something else I took a lot of heat for the other day. I said something about, Grand Lodge titles or whatever are just, egocentric flypaper. That's how we catch. That's how we catch.
Can we bring up a term that I think will cause some consternation? And I think RJ, you'll love this one: Masonic youth. Okay, cringeworthy, right? But we've all heard someone say something like, "Thank God for our Masonic youth." There is no such thing as Masonic youth. That is an oxymoron.
Right.
There are Masons, and then there are the profane. And this idea of Masonic youth misconstrues the nature of our fraternity. So I don't want to get on some rant, because I know me, I'll just fly off the wall and start ranting about, whatever. But the truth is, maybe you want it. I see y'all laughing. Okay. But the truth is that this is a pinpoint, hyper-focused term that helps us understand kind of the mentality that we're fighting against. I think there are literally, I don't know what, 70% or more of our fraternity really don't even know what they're engaged in. They joined Rotary with regalia. And they think that this is some family affair, and we bring our families to lodge, and we have, a bunch of fun. Like, yeah, there's a time and a place for a family, outing, or maybe there's something of that nature. But the truth is that there's no such thing as Masonic youth. And when we try to, I think, confuse ourselves with these terms, we're doing ourselves a disfavor. So when I go back to, like I said, to my litmus test of what we need to cut off, clearly I'm against all youth organizations. And we can go into that. But anyway, RJ, I'm sorry, I probably stole your thunder because
you didn't. But what I thought was interesting is that when we talk about Masonic youth, I used to be so against Masonic youth organizations. And I don't necessarily support the Masonic youth organizations. I was in a lodge meeting once, and a gentleman was talking about how much it meant to him that his granddaughter was in an organization, and this particular youth Masonic, quote unquote, Masonic youth organization, and it meant so much to him, he cried. And I thought, wow, maybe it does have a value. But I think that value is not that it's a Masonic youth organization, but maybe that value is in an organization that cares, right? And if we have D-Malay and we have Rainbow and Job's Daughters, and there's a few others out there, the Boy Builders, all that good stuff. If we say that those are Masonic youth, I think John's data, you can correct me in a minute, John, but there's like the data shows that they don't usually go on to join Masonry.
Right. So what I was going to add in was,
real quick, like if those organizations, what makes them Masonic, quote unquote? Is it because the founders were Mason? Is it because they're funded by Masons? Because there are a ton of lodges that fund Boy Scout troops. Is the Boy Scouts a Masonic organization? Are Boy Scouts Masonic youth? Or Girl Scouts?
And I would go to that and just say, well, why is a Masonic lodge funding a Boy Scout troop? Why is a Masonic lodge funding a Girl Scout troop? We've missed our purpose, and all those funds we're donating don't go to prop up all these different groups out there. They should be going into our lodges, making our initiatic experiences better, revitalizing our lodges, upgrading our regalia, and so forth. I think, I'm an attorney, okay? And one thing I look at in all things I do for my clients is I look at areas of liability, right? We're in this Me Too era. It is highly, I don't know, it's extremely dangerous to bring children around our lodge rooms. It puts us in a position where you have minors, and I don't know every guy in lodge. I hope no one ever does anything to them. But I just think it's highly unwise to have children's events in our lodges. That's the first thing. And as another story, kind of as I brought this up, because now I'm going to start ranting. But when I talk about D-Malay, I had brought up this point to a group of Texas Freemasons, and the level of vitriol was pretty extreme. Calling me a coward, attacking my character, telling me, and these are like state master counselors and such, like basically telling me I'm the worst person alive, and that they never want to, just by virtue of me saying we should study and whether to see if they actually contribute anything to Masonry. So I took a step back and I said, you know what, I'll visit a DMLA chapter. And I was invited to one, actually, by one of the state officers. This state officer happens to be 21 years old. He's still a DMLA. He's an entered apprentice, okay? And you know what he told me? I said, why aren't you going through the work? Well, I don't have enough time right now because I'm in school. And I'm sitting there going, well, maybe you'd have enough time if you weren't devoting it to DMLA. So, you know, I don't, if merely they were a children's organization, but I think we're competing over the same territory. I don't know if they really contribute anything positively. And I think more especially, we've lost the focus of what Freemasonry is. So when we talk about all these different groups, that's primarily the focus is we need to go back to what are we? And they confuse I think they confuse the issue.
I think that's a great point to kind of put a bow on the conversation, because we really need to figure out what is our value proposition going forward. Because if we don't know what we are and what we stand for, then we can't really sell that as far as, you know, explaining to the general public or explaining to our members, who are part of the reason we're declining, what we stand for, what we don't stand for, what makes it unique to the initiatic experience, and then what is Masonry. The one last data point on that is that the data that I collected a couple years ago, of the members who took the survey, about 1 in 11, about 9% of them were members of a youth group like DMLA prior to joining Freemasonry. So we're saying that we get about a 9% rate of return, or, you know, that only 1 in 11 of our members were DMLA, for example, coming in. So is that good? Is that bad? You know, we don't have an alternative universe to compare it to, as if the DMLA never existed. But at least to me, at the surface level, without digging into the data, it doesn't seem like the juice is worth the squeeze. So with that, I think we should start going around for final thoughts and shameless plugs. And let's start with Robert for your final thoughts.
Sorry, on mute there, just like at work. I would say, first of all, regarding the youth groups, is that for me, I know a lot of guys who went through, and maybe it's just my luck, right? Like one of my best friends, Brian, was a DMLA, and he became a master mason, and you know, we've gone on road trips together, and he loved the DMLA. He thought it was wonderful, and he spent some great time with his pops doing that, and it was so incredible. And the same thing with like my a good friend of mine, and whether he considers himself a mentor or not, Brother Steve Harrison was involved in that as well. And when I hear those guys talk about DMLA, I have a hard time thinking about why I ever had or do have sometimes these feelings of like, why are we funding those things or whatever? Are we taken away from Masonry? But overall, though, I think it really lies in like what John was talking about, that value exchange. What is that? What does it look like? And if it works for you and your family, I think that's all fine, well, and good. You know, we was in the YouTube chat, and Joe Martinez was in there, and Joe talked about how his family's involved in Rainbow, and you know, his family loves it. It brings a sense of family to what they're doing, and that's great. And I hope that if you are involved in those youth groups, that they're bringing that value add. I've also heard horror stories, so I mean, I guess it goes both ways, like with anything. But as far as this particular episode, I want to thank Lance for coming on and sharing his perspective, which again is it can sound at times rough, and that's because sometimes we have to just talk openly about where problems lie in order to work through them and see the common ground and where we can maneuver to fix things. And I think I share the other hosts' sentiments this week when we talk about where our hopes lie for the future, and looking at the data and the science. That's really where I pool most of my resources. And if I'm going to bet on something, I'm going to bet on the science. And it seems as though we might be doing better in the future if we can continue to keep pushing forward and bringing education and podcasts and books and whatever else out there, bringing that to lodges. And speaking of that, I launched a new website. I'm not managing anybody or anything like that. I just put up a website and I put out feelers. I said, hey, if you're willing to travel around and go speak to lodges, send me your bio and a picture and your prepared topics, and I'll put it all on a website and we'll talk about it and people can contact you. I don't get copies of the emails or anything. So if you're a Masonic speaker and you want on this list, let me know. You can go to masonicinstruction.com and you're going to see a bunch of speakers that you've heard of before. Seth Anthony, Lance Kennedy, Steve Harrison, Mike Pohl, Bill Hosler, Joe Wages, Jamie Paul Lamb, plus all the TMR guys, myself. You can go there, click on their bio, read about them, and you can hit a link right there, and it'll pull up your own email there, and you can email them personally and get in touch with them to come out and do a presentation for your lodge. If you're a presenter, let me know. Let's get you up on there and working through some things. It's just a resource for bringing education to lodges. I just want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast and for listening to Whence Came You. I really appreciate it. Sunday nights, 9:30. If you're out there and you haven't subscribed to Whence Came You on YouTube, please do that also. And that's it. It was a long-winded answer for my final. Thanks for putting up with me.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Mike the intern.
So, no, I totally don't think that Masonry is dying. I also, like Juan, don't think it's really refining. As far as dependent bodies go, again, some of them, yeah, I would say they probably aren't helping us. I actually enjoy quite a few of the other ones, though. Because I am York Rite and Scottish Rite, and actually plan to go Scottish Rite in the Southern jurisdiction too. So I'm enjoying that a lot. So yeah, I mean, does it distract? Sure. But do I still go to my Blue Lodge and participate? Yes, I do. Absolutely. Can't really speak to and much more about the decrease, other than that, the one thing I see with lodges that is really a problem for me is you look at a lodge that has 170 members listed and they got 15 that show up week after week. And, or some of them even have 20, or 30 members and they have 10 or 15 show up for the, week after week. We need more than that to be active. That's really what's, we can have the numbers huge. Ohio's got, at least 80,000 members in Ohio. And yet how many of those are really, not even counting the duals and plurals, if you want to split that up, but how many are active? How many actually show up to their lodge week after week and do anything? And and are living in Ohio. Let's even look at that. How many haven't just ran off to Florida because they're ready for retirement? So anyway, thanks for coming on, Lance. And it was a good show tonight.
All right. Okay, Juan, over to you.
There you go. I got to read it because I wrote it and I like how I wrote it and I quoted myself, and that's what I do. Stop trying to say Freemasonry.
Stop. Say it in Spanish.
Okay. Déjate de estar tratando de salvar la masonería. Salva la experiencia de tu logia. Ooh.
Yeah.
Very, very spicy.
Ay caliente.
Basically, stop trying to save Freemasonry and save your lodge experience. If your focus is in making sure that your experience in lodge and the experience of the brothers that come to your lodge is meaningful, it's lasting, it's really what they need, then your lodge is going to be okay. And by consequence, you will have a positive effect on Freemasonry as a whole. if people come and visit your lodge and they get an amazing experience, they see perfectly. Hey Siri, I'm not talking to you. If they see a perfectly executed opening and closing of the lodge, if they are able to feel the prayers that the chaplain is presenting, if they're able to feel the reverence whenever the whenever the colors are presented, all those things matter. And if you focus on making sure that lodge experience is one that's positive, then the brothers that come and visit are going to be energized, and they might want to replicate that in their own respective lodges. So some of these brothers might feel depressed listening to us talking about the decline of Masonry and the death of Masonry. It's like, don't be like, you listening right now, you are part of the sustainability of our fraternity, and the catalyst to allow us to reach an even higher place than we've ever been.
Yeah.
So
it's not cliche to say that literally everyone listening right now is the future of Freemasonry. That is not.
that's right.
That's not cliche. It's not an exaggeration. We are the future of Freemasonry.
That's absolutely true. So thank you all, brothers, for listening. Throwing out a casual smib for Simba on Fire on our YouTube channel. he was the first one to ever do a super chat.
Yeah, we've been experimenting with lots of different things, and it was awesome for our first super chat where your chat gets promoted to the top and big bold color. The first ever super chat for TMR was a casual smib. So mote it be.
That was priceless. So thank you all for listening and for helping us continue to spread this word.
That's a T-shirt. I think we need like a little fire logo and like casual smib. We've talked about it before, but we put it up there. Maybe a little Simba on fire. That's who said it kind of quote.
Nice. All right, over to you, Lance, for your closing thoughts.
Well, guys, thank you so much for having me on the Masonic Roundtable. It was a great experience. I listened to this podcast quite a bit, and I've really enjoyed it. I think it's a great resource and really shows that there's a wide interest in the preservation and refinement of our craft, whether it's here in Texas or Ohio or Florida or wherever you are. So first and foremost, just want to say thank you for having me on and giving me this opportunity. Talking about this conversation we've been having tonight, and just kind of encapsulation of, what we're talking about, this decline and so forth. I want to make sure every brother that's listening to this understands, first and foremost, I'm not a negative Nancy. I'm not sitting here just yelling about, some problem that's out there without providing any type of diagnosis or prescriptions about fixing the problem. I've written 2 articles, both of which got tens of thousands of views, that laid out clear and concise plans and points that detail how we can really reverse this trend and preserve ourselves and better ourselves into the future, right? So the first one was 10 propositions for Texas Freemasonry, but I believe these 10 propositions can be applied to any jurisdiction out there, whether it's someone, in Taiwan or in Hungary or in rural Mississippi. I don't care where you're at. These type of prescriptions are universal in their application. They include, guarding the West Gate, making sure we have high quality individuals coming into our lodges. We're not just taking anyone in that we can. I talk about raising dues, increasing the type of ritual and initiatic experience and so forth. So I encourage you to look up 10 propositions for Texas Freemasonry. And then I also want you to read another article, my most recent Masonic article, which deals with 2 trajectories of Freemasonry. And in this article, I lay out a kind of meta prescription for our Grand Lodges, which, if adopted, I believe can help us stave off some of these types of decline. And that includes consolidating failing lodges. If you have a county, we have counties in East Texas and West Texas that have 5,000-6,000 people with 10 lodges. It doesn't make sense. They're really, in most Texas counties, we should have 1 lodge per county. So this is another type of prescription. So again, I'm not just saying, hey, the outlook is grim, let's just sit here and console ourselves. I'm saying, no, we have something we can do about it right now, okay, and into the future. As Juan said, though, and I really agreed, what Juan said is, look, we may not be able to implement these types of meta changes at this right now at this time, because we're not in Grand Lodge line and so forth. But I do think we can increase the experience in our individual lodges. We can reach out to a brother that we know hasn't attended in a while and say, hey, why don't you come to the lodge? We have an education experience. Or really trying to better ourselves, bit by bit, whether that's making an ante room, a much more reverent location, or increasing the experience in our lodge meeting. I think we can do many things to increase that experience, and that in the aggregate will help us in the holistic sense. So one comment though someone made, and I'm reading it here, it says, if you join multiple failing lodges, don't you make a bigger failing lodge? Make them join successful lodges. I agree, Mike, with your comment. I don't think we should just make bigger failing lodges, but I do feel that if you have a larger group of guys, there's going to be more competition for our officer positions and chairs, and you're also going to consolidate resources, so they're not scraping this resource barrel thin. And in a sense, that will generate some more interest and impetus for guys to really contribute, because if they're not contributing, they're never going to be elected to line. So that's at least my theory, and maybe it'll play out a different way. So in short, without waxing, and using up all the time, I really am glad I'm on here. The outlook is great. We need to do what we can now to better the fraternity, demand high standards in our individual lodges, and demand high standards across the board in Grand Lodges and so forth, and really take a good hard look and say, hey, what is contributing to Freemasonry and what isn't? And if there is dead weight, we need to be bold enough to cut it off. So thank you all for having me on the Masonic Roundtable.
Awesome. Thank you, Brother Lance. Appreciate it. Final thoughts from my end. Again, shocking revelation, and you're going to hear it before it comes out, in the next year or so. We're at the under 1 million men mark, and that's okay, right? It is what it is. But as we've hopefully hit a couple times in this episode, is that it doesn't mean that it can't be fixed, and it doesn't mean we can't hold on and make sure that we turn this into something that we want it to be. So let's keep that positive and make sure we're that momentum into the future. I think someone, I don't know if they purposefully or had a little slip in the chat, but someone called it momentum mori, and I was like, that's really appropriate, right? Remember your momentum, right? And that's what we should do. We talk about memento mori, remember that you will die, but also that we need to have momentum as we're dying, and understand that there are ways we can turn the ship around, but it's going to take some time. So that's a positive way of looking at it. Another good question on the Facebook group or the page for episode 249 was, okay, if we had the peaks in percentage of male population in 1920s, if we could get the same percentage wise of membership today, what would that look like? How many members should we have today to reach the same percentage of males in the general population? And so I looked it up, and in kind of the first hump, the first peak of our membership that we've been collecting data on since 1924, that was about 3.3 million men, and with a population of 121 million people, not men, but just people, that made us about 2.7% of the population. So if you apply that same percentage wise to where we are today, if we as Freemasons were 2.7% of the population today, there would be 8.79 million Master Masons. So we are at an eighth of the strength, as a ratio goes, to where we were in the 20s. So it was a really good question, and it does give us some perspective of not just the total number, but how we are in relation to society. So
geez, John, you just sucked all the wind out of my lungs.
Woof. So
I'm gonna go chew on a shotgun.
If we can just octuple our numbers by next year, let's do that, fix that, turn the ship around. We'll do it. So no pressure, but
just some one-day classes.
Let's just crank them out. Here we go. No, but this has been fun. This is very academic. It is very heady to think about what it could be. No one knows the answer. We're all gazing into crystal balls, but the mere fact that we're talking about it shows that the passion is there, the interest in saving a good thing is there. So let's keep this momentum going. You all are the future of Freemasonry. With that, thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.